Almost everyone alive today can agree that the Jim Crow laws that stopped black children from attending white schools was wrong. It oppressed black people and ensured that they didn't get the same education as white students. To compensate for those years of discrimination and segregation that black students had to endure, in 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower signed an executive order which outlawed discrimination to employment based on race. Almost 10 years later, Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It banned discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, and sex in the areas of employment, public facilities, and government programs. In the following years, more regulations were passed, which mandated that employers of government facilities must capitalize on minorities and women. This was also eventually brought to education. The goal of affirmative action was and has been to bring minority students who have been oppressed to equal footing with white people. The success of the program is somewhat controversial. While some argue that affirmative action is a great thing for American minorities because it helps them get into college, looking beyond that, affirmative action should not be legal, as it is discriminatory to hold one race above another, and affirmative action ends up hurting minorities more than it helps them. While yes, for many, many years in America, white people were held above other races, it is not beneficial as a society to do the same thing backwards. This is called reverse discrimination. We as a people should strive for greatness together, not punish descendants of racist people. Take the case of Abigail Fisher. Fisher is a white student who applied for a college in Texas. Another student, who was black and had slightly worse grades, was accepted instead of her. Now, if the roles were reversed, this would definitely not be considered a good thing. Why should it be any different the way it is? Imagine it was you who had worked hard to get into college, only to be rejected because of another student who didn't even do as well as you. How could that be? Well, that would come from the box that other students checked when taking college-bound tests. For example, at one university, checking African American on your SAT could get you as much as 310 more points. You'd say this was unfair, of course, that the acts of someone's descendants shouldn't affect whether or not they get into college, whether it be positive or negative. To quote Martin Luther King Jr., "We should not be judged for the color of our skin, but by the content of our character." Affirmative Action's original mission statement was to make reparations to minorities who had been historically oppressed, and more recently to diversify the education community. While this is a noble goal, affirmative action fails to really achieve this. This is for two main reasons. Firstly, Asian Americans, who are a minority, are very hurt by affirmative action. To give a sense of scope, when the state of California banned affirmative action, the Caltech Asian population skyrocketed from 25% to 43%. Nearly 60% of Asian students were being rejected from Caltech due to affirmative action. This both fails to help a historically oppressed minority as well as diversify. Aside from this, affirmative action does not even help black Americans. If less qualified students are being admitted to colleges, what happens to them? I'll introduce the concept of mismatching schools. The idea is when a student is admitted to a college due to affirmative action, this often means they are not qualified for the school they are being admitted to, while they would have been qualified for other schools. Dr. Thomas Sowell from the University of Chicago, who has written several books on affirmative action and similar subject matters, sums it up well.
These are your words. More than 70% of black students fail to graduate.
Yes.
Why?
Because they're mismatched with Berkeley. That is, these students, the average black student at Berkeley is above the national average on test scores. It's just that the average white student is further above the national average, and the average Asian student further above than the white students. And so in that atmosphere, these students who have every qualification to succeed are artificially turned into failures. And the only beneficiary of that is the University of California at Berkeley. Because what they've effectively done is rented these bodies for window dressing for a few years. And then when they're through with them, they're put aside. A new bunch of bodies are brought in.
This mismatching of schools is causing the very students that affirmative action is trying to help to have to drop out due to being underqualified. This, alongside with holding one race above another, makes it obvious that affirmative action should be banned nationwide.